This film offers a critical view of the audiovisual industry. The inadequate practices identified are shown so as to illustrate where we can improve. A text on black background, MeSeenInclusivo.com presents a documentary with the collaboration of Valencia City Council. Inclusivity, Beyond Cinema. In a Valencia town hall building, a lift descends to a courtyard with a garden.
I am Abdelatif Fouida, and in 2014 I starred in a short film called XMILE. At the beginning, it was a very humble project. A short film between friends, self-financed, with no other purpose than to make the short film. And suddenly you see that the short film grows, starts to look for its own path, starts to look for its own translations. It starts to become a phenomenon, to the point where it discovers a new audience. An audience that, honestly, I didn't even know existed.
In the garden, Fouida finds a piece of painted canvas and smiles. It is an object that appeared in XMILE.
At the premiere of XMILE, I met several deaf-blind people. I mean deaf-blind, and a person was gesturing to them like this. Tack, tack, tack. And I can tell you that the person signing for the other person got excited, and the person holding their hand felt the film's emotion, and my brain exploded. My brain simply exploded.
On 15th December 2016, the city of Valencia hosted the premiere of XMILE, the first European multisensory, accessible short film. This project not only caused a high impact on society due to its innovation, but also because it laid the foundations of inclusive cinema, a method that optimizes the participation of people with disabilities in the audiovisual medium. How do you create a short film that stimulates all 5 senses? What barriers did inclusive cinema encounter? To answer these questions, we must first get to know the man behind it and understand what drove him to advocate a culture for all. Chapter 1. Towards XMILE. Miguel Angel Font Bisier was born in Valencia on 29th of January 1987, and from his early years onwards, he showed signs of having a complex inner world.
There were days when everything was joy, smiles and games. However, there were others when Miguel Angel changed radically. He disappeared. It was as if he were in another world. That's how my parents and I realized that he had a lot of imagination. And we decided, and so we did, that the best way to help him was to encourage this through culture, through knowledge, through the arts in general. With my father, he played chess, talked about science, mathematics, and other complex subjects. I also remember him taking him to the German school and to the concerts he gave as a violinist, or to rock concerts where he played the drums.
As for his passion for cinema, it was his grandmother who instilled this in him.
So you see, instead of stories, she would tell him films, and they would spend hours on the sofa watching all kinds of films. Fantasy, action, classics. But the ones that drove Miguel Angel crazy were horror films. In fact, this meant that my mother and I sometimes argued, as some of them were really powerful. But hey, if it's helped him do what he does, I'll take it as a good thing.
When Miguel Angel entered the Faculty of Audiovisual Communication in 2005, His grandmother was the first to appear in his short films, and his grandfather took part soon afterwards. Together with his mother, they attended dozens of screenings until they both passed away. In fact, the last short film his grandfather saw was XMILE.
I liked it. I liked the short film. It's good, it's good. It can compete with Indiana Jones, that one.
In his mother's case, she preferred not to act. Being a doctor, she helped the special effects teams to make the wounds and makeup look realistic. These resources were frequent in Miguel Angel's early projects. Influenced by the cinema he watched with his grandmother, he began shooting action and horror shorts that allowed him to be creative with the camera, editing, and sound design. Thanks to them, his way of directing evolved, and, after graduating in 2010, he set himself new challenges. Thus, Ienesis came into being, a very different work from what he had done until then, which laid the foundations for XMILE.
Ienesis is what is known as a fashion film, a project that combines elements of narrative and cinematography with others that come from the world of fashion. For example, the costumes were created by a fashion designer, and the makeup and hairstyling was done by a stylist who came from the same sector.
Ienesis premiered in September 2010, won several awards, and was selected at an international festival for the first time. Due to the interest it aroused, Miguel Angel turned Ienesis into a trilogy to experiment with new color techniques and visual effects. Furthermore, when he premiered the sequel, he applied a resource that would later give rise to XMILE's multisensoriality. Before the screening, he offered the audience an exhibition of costumes and objects from the film. In parallel, between 2010 and 2013, he shot other projects that also influenced XMILE. In some, he learned how to coordinate large groups of people, and in others, how to manage makeup times when working with special effects. Later, in 2014, he organized several film workshops in different schools in the Valencian community that allowed him to rethink his way of directing.
When I was in the classroom, explaining my work to the children, I gradually distanced myself from the projects and realized something. I could be in a room full of people with a team that supported me all the way, and I felt very lonely. Also, because of the fear of criticism and external judgment, I didn't switch off, so I didn't really enjoy it either.
He's a director who's very clear about things. That's what I always say about him when I have the opportunity. I think he's also very obsessive about what he does, and that's a good thing. To get projects of this kind off the ground, you have to be obsessed. You have to focus. You have to be very clear about it.
As obsession began to gain ground, Miguel Angel decided to let go of some of those burdens and wrote a new script. A story that talks precisely about the importance of reconnecting with oneself, one that would change his way of understanding cinema forever. Chapter 2: Cinema of the Senses.
Tired, overexploited, and practically withered, the Earth stops producing oxygen and nature becomes sterile.
XMILE is a futuristic science fiction short film, a genre that often presents technical and narrative difficulties, as not only the project's plot has to be worked out, but also the universe in which it takes place must be created.
The first thing Miguel Angel did in XMILE was to delegate. It was a very complex project, and there were more than 80 people in the team. Then, he recovered elements from the fashion films we had shot. We worked with a fashion designer to create the costumes. We used a lot of special effects, and we built several sets on a sound stage.
We are done.
It took 3 years to finish XMILE, and it's only 14 minutes long. But it was worth the effort, especially because of what happened next.
As the screenings that included an exhibition showing his fashion film's costumes had been well received, Miguel Angel reused this resource so that more people would come to see the short film. But he wanted to take it further. XMILE would be enjoyed through all 5 senses. To achieve this, the first sense he added was the sense of touch, through an exhibition of the costumes and objects in the film.
Certainly the touch attracted a lot of attention, but the peculiarity of XMILE that remained in the spotlight was another.
What's the particularity?
Its particularity is that it is the first European short film that can not only be seen and heard, but also smelt.
How?
Through devices installed in the room via wireless connection, a number of fragrances were released, synchronized with different moments of XMILE. Some had to do with certain plot elements, while others were the perfumes of the film's main characters.
We had the feeling that smell could add information to certain sequences. That is, it's not so much like a shot of when something appears. You smell it and that's it. Rather, we set the film's mood.
With the design of smells ready, the experience of taste was added. As a character walks through a party where people are consuming brightly colored drinks and sweets, it was decided to recreate them with the help of a Valencian cocktail bar.
That's when I started to think, if I was aiming to get more people to come to the cinema, was multisensoriality opening the doors to a wider audience? In other words, could people with disabilities come to see XMILE?
To find out more, he first contacted several associations of people with disabilities who told him about the main audiovisual accessibility tools: audio description for blind people and subtitling for deaf people.
Basically, audio description is an audio track that is incorporated into the film. In it, a voiceover explains visual information that cannot be perceived through the audio channel of the work.
They walk towards the club. It is located in a ground floor commercial building with rusty shutters that are half raised.
Then, in subtitling for deaf people, information such as sound effects, music and some intonations are added. In Spain, in addition, colours are differentiated according to the characters' dialogues, and positions are used to differentiate the dialogues themselves from the rest of the information, such as sound effects or music. Although accessible cinema is nowadays fairly standardized, it is true that we have reached a point where we are more concerned with quality over quantity.
Hi, I'm David, and I'm totally blind. Currently, accessibility in Spain is done by companies that have nothing to do with the producers of the works. This causes a monumental mess, because there are scenes that may be described in great detail and have nothing to do with the plot, while other important parts of the plot tell you nothing. In Fantastic Beasts, for example, the creatures in the audio description are called something other than what they are in the film. In fact, they are not even named. They are described when they actually have a name, and it would be much quicker. And, for example, in Inception, the protagonist's totem in the final scene, when it is important to know whether he's dreaming or not, because they don't tell you if it's there or not, so the user is left with a blank slate.
Regarding subtitling, there are times when information is added that is perfectly visible on screen, and it is distracting. At other times, the line is too long, making it difficult to read. Sometimes there are even 3 lines of text instead of 2, which is the maximum allowed.
Another flaw I see in film subtitles is that they sometimes anticipate information. For example, in the horror film Scream. In this film, the killer wears a mask with elongated eyes and mouth and calls out to his first victim. The victim answers him. While they are talking on the phone, the killer has a color caption, I remember. It was yellow or green. Then the killer, with the mask on, stabs the victim. Time goes by, about 10 minutes or so into the film, and the killer appears without the mask, walking around, talking to the protagonists, and what color was the caption? Well, the same color as when he killed the victim. This means that I already know who the killer is from the beginning, and I lose the surprise factor. This has also happened to me with Thesis and The Usual Suspects, for example. Another important detail is that many audiovisual companies confuse, let's say, ordinary subtitling with accessible subtitling. For example, I bought the Blu-ray version of the film Would You Kill a Child? Because it said on the cover that it had Spanish subtitles. I thought, great. I went home, put the film on, and then I saw that the main characters started talking and there were no subtitles. At first, I assumed it was a problem with the Blu-ray, but then foreign characters appeared, speaking in other languages, and then the Spanish subtitles appeared. Well, it was just another disappointment for me. I can give you more examples, such as the Blu-ray of John Wick. It has Spanish subtitles, but they are not accessible. In the case of Jack Reacher, it has accessible subtitles, in English. Very useful for Spanish-speaking deaf people. In the case of this film, it is Spanish and it is called Rec 4. It has subtitles, yes, but they are not accessible. They are only in English. This film is Spanish and has accessible subtitles and audio description, so I'll buy it right now. I can't wait to enjoy it. After hearing the views of people with disabilities, the next step was to talk to subtitling and audio description companies.
The reason why the accessibility service is not always optimal is because the companies that work in this field, although we do our best, work with many limitations, especially time constraints. We normally have a week or two to subtitle for the deaf and audio describe an entire film, and in addition, although we have the help of the UNE standard and we try to adhere to its recommendations, there are many aspects that remain very open, and this forces us to make certain decisions that, without contact with the client and the director of the film, are sometimes not the most suitable for the final audience.
As a company dedicated to producing broadcast masters, DCPs and final masters, I do have to say that the accessibility companies have made a great effort to adapt above all to the times we give them, or that the producers give them. Also from within the film industry, especially at the beginning. Nowadays, much less, although some still slip in from time to time. Real atrocities have been committed, such as audio descriptions recorded in a bathroom recorded by the director himself, who has a stammer. We have the problem of the industry, and we also have the second problem, which is its showing. Where can we see this work? Producers have gradually become aware, and one of their complaints is, where can you see it?
I was shocked to learn this information. I realized that all my work so far, everything I had written and directed, could not be enjoyed by everyone. And if it had been adapted by accessibility companies, they would have had a hard time capturing the essence of these projects. I was failing in my duty as a creator of stories, which is to bring them to the widest possible audience. I also recalled my childhood. It is thanks to cinema that I have the profession I have. Is it possible that we're missing out on new talent just because of the state of audiovisual accessibility?
Determined, Miguel entered fully into the world of accessibility and learned to subtitle and audio describe according to the UNE standard. For the first time, people with disabilities were thereby able to view his work on an equal footing with the rest of the audience.
Text on black background. How much is a genuine smile worth? Year 2087. The Earth is seen from space. Vegetation zones are beginning to disappear.
The process of making XMILE accessible took place over summer 2016 and came about through trial and error with the help of an expert voice actor.
Then Herman and I started working together. And practically on our phones, we would record the voice tracks and I would say to him, read this sentence. And we played it. Change it because maybe this information is more interesting here. And then we went to the ONCE building and we interviewed different blind or visually impaired people, and then we asked them, what do you think?
Before completing XMILE's accessibility, Miguel Angel retouched it together with several people with disabilities and experts in the field. In the meantime, he obtained enough support to hold the film's premiere, which was sold out in just 48 hours.
Come on, XMILE, on the count of 3.
How complex the plot is. I liked it a lot for that, I think. I find it very interesting that there is a creator who takes the time to do the audio description of his own work. That's something I haven't seen before.
I came to see this short film, and I liked it a lot. There are things that struck me, for example, the futuristic theme. It was more difficult for me to understand it, but the short film in general is very well adapted, and although I have impaired vision, I was able to read the subtitles with some effort while viewing the image. In general, I understood it, and I liked it a lot.
In terms of measures for accessibility at the premiere, Braille descriptions were added for the tactile exhibition, and, along with several interpreter guides, the XMILE script was adapted so that deaf-blind people could also enjoy the experience.
I am Clara. I'm a totally deaf-blind person, and I am very happy because I have been able to go to the cinema for the first time in my life. Before the screening, I saw an exhibition and tasted some liqueurs. Then XMILE started and I felt everything. I could smell the grass, the perfumes, and a kind of smoke. It smelled weird, what a contrast. I felt the music through the sense of vibration. Even the seat was vibrating, and I felt the music in the party scene.
The XMILE soundtrack also became another avenue for connection between the short film and its disabled audience.
Composing the soundtrack for XMILE was a challenge, and also gave me many joys relating to the inclusion of people with disabilities in the project. For example, the song I composed for the credits, entitled Smile, bridged the gap, collaborating with 3 organizations for people with disabilities. Firstly, a sign language version was created together with the Federation of Deaf People of the Valencian community. When the song was screened in cinemas and other festivals, balloons were handed out so that people could experience the music in a way closer to how deaf people feel it.
Imagine you are listening to a song in English, and to find out what it says, you go to Google and translate the lyric. That's fine, but that's how you lose nuances and details related to grammar, music, or the meaning of the lyrics. Therefore, ideally, it should be done by a deaf person directly in sign language, because it is their own language.
Later, with the ONCE choir, Smile became an a cappella song. Finally, Miguel Angel traveled to Mexico City and there adapted the song in the Baroque style with a group of musicians who were both sighted and blind. These 3 versions of Smile were as unexpected as they were special to me, and their reception was a great success.
Radio Nacional de España. Informativos.
It would be interesting for the film industry to make this one-off event a regular method in the future, in films, so that people with disabilities can also access and experience films as people who do not have that disability experience them.
Of course, but I believe that what will be shown is that these tools will not only help people with disabilities to enjoy cinema more, but that everyone will enjoy it, which is what always happens in the end. When you incorporate accessibility options into a communication tool, everyone improves the experience.
In 2017, the university where Miguel Angel graduated, CEU Cardenal Herrera, became interested in the proposal and developed an academic research project on XMILE. It collected the opinions of more than 250 people, half of them with disabilities.
As all the screenings were attended by people with and without disabilities, we gave them the same questionnaire and then compared the extent to which they felt, for example, more identified with the characters or felt certain impressions, for example, that had to do with the plot.
This is not the only action taken by the academic and educational sector with XMILE. Miguel Angel visited a large number of schools and universities to motivate students to take accessibility into account as part of every project in which they participate.
It's a very cool experience, because I didn't know the work he has done. Let's hope that he continues like this, and that many like him can do many things for disabled people, so that we can understand films better.
The courses and conferences multiplied, and the trips became a constant. Mexico, Boston, Peru, and various places in Spain. Vicente, a visually impaired person who joined the project in July 2016, accompanied many of them.
Today is Monday, the 12th of June, 2017. It's 12 o'clock in the morning, and Vicente, what are we doing here on the AVE?
In theory, we are going to the Senate for a hearing on the XMILE project. It is an experience that is going to be...
extraordinary.
Extraordinary, because of the company too, naturally.
Miguel Angel and Vicente, both extremely nervous, arrived at the Spanish Senate, a destination they never dreamed would cross their path. Would Miguel Angel's speech motivate the senators? What would they say about it?
Hello, good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for welcoming me to such an important chamber. What are we going to talk about? XMILE, the first short film that combines the 5 senses and accessibility tracks, allowing people with and without sensory disabilities to enjoy a cinematic experience together without barriers. This has generated an inevitable social, cultural, and educational impact. Viewers have experienced a different sensory reality that invites them to reflect. In the most extreme cases, we have seen people who, at the age of 50, were coming to the cinema for the first time. Let us look after our culture, our legacy, and let us make our society a support to facilitate overcoming the conditions to which people may be condemned. Let's find a way to encourage production companies, television stations, cinemas, and distributors, directors, and screenwriters. We are all part of the change. 4 years ago, I asked myself how much a genuine smile was worth. But here I say, how much are all smiles worth?
I do not know if any of the spokespersons would like to speak, from the smallest to the largest. For the Podemos group, Senator Lima Gonzalez.
It must be a commitment of all political parties to accessibility, as has already been mentioned, regardless of political ideology.
For the socialist group, its spokesman, Mr. Montes Hort.
I believe that we will present initiatives so that aid to cinema includes an important and necessary amount for developing projects in this sense.
For the popular group, Senator Tirado.
Dear Miguel Angel, congratulations. You will have our full support and backing. I agree with the other spokespersons so as to be able to take joint, unanimous initiatives so that more and more people can enjoy culture and, in this case, cinema. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
This is an issue on which all the groups seem to find consensus and which remains open in the House, awaiting the adoption of measures that will translate into real steps towards ever greater accessibility to cultural products.
After his visit to the Senate, Miguel Ángel received a call from the Valencian Institute of Culture, the public entity in charge of subsidizing Valencian film production.
My name is José Luis Moreno, Deputy Director of Audiovisuals and Cinematography at the Valencian Institute of Culture. What we did is request a report from Miguel Ángel on the technical conditions that audiovisual productions should have in order to be accessible. And we carried out a study to see if we could incorporate production accessibility as one of the assessment criteria. So what we have done is to incorporate it into the call for aid, but as an obligation, it is not an assessment criterion. It is compulsory.
As the change in subsidies augured well for future developments, Miguel Ángel put aside the multisensory projections and focused his efforts on learning more about cultural accessibility. This served to launch him into writing a new project in mid-2017. A short film in which, unlike XMILE, he was going to consider accessibility from the script stage. Chapter 3, From Accessible to Inclusive.
You watch Blues Time and ask, is this inclusive? Why? I mean, if we then show you the documentary and explain to you what we have done that improves the artistic discourse, but because we have taken more people into account right from the script, you will say, ah, well, there is a world behind it.
Blues Time is the first short film in which Miguel Ángel applied his inclusive filmmaking methodology. It tells the story of a girl who, thanks to music, overcomes a moment of grief. It was co-produced with When Lights Are Low, a Valencian production company that obtained funding for the project from Obra Social La Caixa and the Valencian community's General Society of Writers and Editors, SGAE.
Miguel Ángel's goal was to see how many inclusive resources could be added to Blues Time from script to distribution, and I wanted to be there in the front row to experience it.
My aim with the inclusive resources was for audience with disabilities to enjoy the work directly. In other words, for accessibility to be a support, but for the work to have enough resources and information for these people to have that intimate link that exists between films and their traditional audience. And in this sense, although I applied more than 50 measures in the end, I would like to focus on one that has to do with subtitling and another that has to do with the audio description of Blues Time. Regarding subtitling, the music of the short film has great weight, great value within the plot. In fact, in one of the main scenes, the protagonist plays a series of chords that have to do with what is being told in the plot. So what happens? Well, if an accessibility company had done the subtitling in the traditional way, they would have put G major chord in the subtitles. But, of course, what information are we really giving to hearing impaired people? Therefore, what we had to do was to work on the film script, to intervene from the beginning. And how did we do it? Well, every time the protagonist plays one of these chords, which have a musicality and an emotion behind them, what we did was to associate them with a memory and a color that the girl experiences when she hears them. When a major chord sounds, the memory is pleasant and in orange tones. With the minor chord, the memory is more muted and purplish in color. And for the blues chord, I portrayed an argument in reddish tones. Regarding the audio description, to minimize its presence, what I did was to work on the sound design so that some elements would indicate the presence and movements of certain characters. For example, I assigned the main character a keyring like this. So, when he entered the scene, when he left, when he was near or far away, visually impaired people could identify him without having to resort to an audio description that was constantly telling them, Jay is leaving, or Jay appears.
Another inclusive feature of Blues Time is that it included several people with disabilities in various departments, something that caught the attention of the technical team.
I have worked on many shoots over the last 10 years, making sure that everyone is in place, that we follow the plan, and that everyone has what they need to work. Now, in all these years, I have never seen a team like the one in this short film, because out of 22 people behind the camera, 5 of them were people with disabilities. That is almost 25% of the film crew.
In Blues Time, Miguel Angel no longer worked only with people with sensory disabilities. Thanks to the XMILE screenings, he met people with other types of conditions who offered their support, as in the case of Esther, a woman with brain damage.
What place have they taken me to? A hospital. I've never been afraid of anything, but for 1.5 years, I've had a phobia of hospitals. Because 1.5 years ago, I had a tumour in my heart, 4 centimetres. And well, I escaped. After that, my life changed. It has changed a lot. I can't see out of this eye, I can't see. I have aphasia. I've forgotten how to speak English and Valencian. I can't drive. I can't cycle. I go slower than normal people. I have learned to live again.
You said that you can't ride a bike, but in the short film you ride a bike. Is that on purpose? Is it like a challenge that Miguel Angel set for you?
Blues Time set me a lot of challenges. And I got on a bike. And I remember that during filming he said to me, "Esther, you have to go straight. You look like you're drunk." And of course, I can't say to him, "Miguel Angel, I've had 2 strokes and my stability is not what it was. Sometimes when walking, I go sideways." But well, I know that he was telling me that to get over myself. And in the end, it all turned out well. I liked the fact that people with brain damage like me were taken into account in this project. And I don't know, when are we going to shoot again?
Another inclusive resource I developed was the Film Accessibility Report, a template through which I build bridges of communication and understanding between accessibility companies and the creative teams in my productions. My intention is to make it available to more production companies so that they can make projects in which accessibility is improved and considered from the start. But I would like to go a little further, and that is that, with this type of report, we can measure and identify which accessible or inclusive resources we have added to the work so that more people can identify them and therefore replicate them.
With regard to sign language, Blues Time has a version adapted by deaf people who share a certain resemblance with the actors in the short film. Filming it was a very enriching and, above all, fun experience.
Concentrate, come on, please. Concentrate. Let's...
Inclusive cinema motivated Miguel Angel, and every day he wanted to try it out in fresh content for Blues Time. He created an accessible trailer, an audio description of the poster, and a sign language version of the film's synopsis. It took more than 2 years to prepare these materials, and there was a lot of expectation before their release. But in summer 2019, Miguel Angel received great news. Blues Time's production company had obtained a grant to shoot their first feature film. At the age of 32, Miguel Angel had achieved the dream of every screenwriter and director. A dream which also entailed a heavy workload and responsibility, so he had to leave Blues Time without an official premiere to concentrate his efforts on Swing, The Life of a Secret. Chapter 4. The Barriers to Cinema. Swing is a dramatic comedy revolving around the secrets hidden in families. From the outset, this film posed many challenges, the main one being its budget. However, Miguel Angel never saw austerity as a problem. His production company obtained funding from Obra Social La Caixa to apply the inclusive method to the film, and he wanted to take advantage of the opportunity. Some of the resources he put into practice this time were: incorporate the accessibility team from pre-production and integrate them in interdepartmental meetings. Create a more accurate and comprehensive accessibility report. In terms of subtitles for deaf people, he worked with the accessibility team to assign specific colors to the characters' costumes so that they matched the colors of the subtitles and people with hearing disabilities could quickly identify who was speaking.
Vinga, imagina que te'n vas. De què viuràs?
Jo ja no puc més. Que no passa res, Raúl. De veres.
Miguel Angel also worked with people with disabilities, both in front of and behind the camera. For example, the character of Geordie was played by a deaf actor whose mother tongue is sign language.
Mola. Incisor.
Repeat. Wrong. Wrong.
I thought it was incredible the day Pablo came to film, how Miguel Angel talked to him, signing every indication so that Pablo would know.
I didn't meet Pablo during the shoot, but I got to know him during the wardrobe tests, and I connected with him. I wish I could have had a scene with him, but at least I was able to relate to him that day.
What both Miguel Angel and I wanted was to see how, in some way, all the multidisciplinary teams on a shoot with so much tension, so much stress, how they received a person with a disability. Well, at first I even felt bad for Miguel Angel, because in addition to all the hassle of directing the film, he had to be aware of where I was. Because it's true that on the first day, my best companion was a tree. With so much bustle and movement, they went to and fro, changing the set, and in the end, I was always alone. But well, on the second day, all that changed, because once we broke down the communication barriers, they saw me more, and I also opened up more to the team. Well, just one of the team. Delighted. It has been magnificent, and a great experience, naturally.
Despite the tight schedule and the stress involved, Swing was shot on time and on budget.
So post-production began and Miguel Angel began to get tired. He was still traveling with XMILE and giving workshops, conferences and some political appearances.
Now the festival is starting, but I've already been here for 4 days, between Lima, Piura, Lima.
He also directed side projects in which he continued to experiment with inclusive cinema. As for Blues Time, although it still had no official premiere, it was screened in places such as the Banco de Valencia and aroused the interest of certain research groups in universities. For example, a university in Qatar asked to dub it into Arabic to develop a series of workshops and theses.
ما هي موسيقتك المفضلة؟
لا أعرف. بوب، ريجيتون. ما الأمر؟ لا تكن مقرفا.
ما زال هذا الصوت أعظم من الريجيتون.
It was even planned to premiere in Qatar, and I was already packing my bags to travel there to present it. But of course, we're talking about 2020, and all the plans we had were scuttled because of the pandemic.
When the lockdown arrived, the sound, color, and accessibility still had to be finished on Swing, but it was possible to complete them remotely. The next step was to be able to distribute it in cinemas, but the pandemic made it impossible, so the film had a single screening as part of the Mostra de Valencia program. And this was when reality hit.
To begin with, the film's distributor refused to make accessible versions of the trailer and poster. And at the premiere, there were several problems experienced by the deaf people who attended, starting with Pablo, our actor.
I went to the premiere looking forward to it, and during the screening, what happened? Well, I was disappointed with the subtitles because the colors didn't match those of the characters' costumes, and I got really confused.
It turned out that when the copy for the cinema was made, the work we had done on the subtitles was lost, and no one could tell us what had happened.
Afterwards, there was no sign language interpreter on stage, and Miguel Angel, who is not a professional and did his best, had to interpret. These were the shortcomings I noted, and I, who was looking forward to it, was rather disappointed.
After the screening at the festival, the film was distributed by platforms. We started off quite well, because Swing became part of the catalogue of Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and Filmin. It was even broadcast on TV channels such as A Punt. But that's fine. In all cases, the film was distributed without audio description and without the color subtitling that we had created with the accessibility team.
As a blind person, I was very happy to know that Swing was an inclusive project. And even more so when I found out that I could watch it on Netflix, which was released on the platform. What happened is that when I went to watch it, I was disappointed because the film had no audio description, when through social networks he had announced the release of Swing on Netflix as an inclusive film. Afterwards, I was a bit upset when I asked him for explanations, because he was upset and he explained to me everything that had happened with Swing. So I learned something from all this, and that is that one thing is the creative process, what the director and the whole team work on to make the film, and then another is the distribution.
This is how Miguel Angel came up against the barriers of the audiovisual industry, a market that is not yet ready to distribute a 100% inclusive work. Disillusioned, he decided to take some time and reflect. Until then, with XMILE and Blues Time, he had been able to control the distribution process and overcome the few difficulties he had encountered. But in launching a film into the real industry, he had discovered new obstacles that hindered the consumption of accessible works. Moreover, due to the restrictions imposed on filming after lockdown, he decided to pause his work as a filmmaker. He reflected that the findings regarding inclusive cinema were accumulating without any order or classification in his computer. Could this be a good time to organize and disseminate them? There was definitely still a long way to go. And then a new opportunity presented itself. Chapter 5. Academia and Transfer. At the age of 33, Miguel Angel returned to university, this time to the Jaume I University in Castellón. A professor wanted to know what had happened with Swing, to see if something could be done about it in her area. Excited, and thinking that the proposal came from audiovisual communication, he went to the centre's recording studios. However, there he found another surprise. No Spanish audiovisual communication faculty includes accessibility in its syllabus. The proposal came from Irene de Hijas, a researcher at the Applied Languages, Literature and Translation Department.
In 2019, I got to know Miguel Angel's work. And during the pandemic, we realized that he had enough material to package academically. That is why I asked him if he would like me to supervise his doctoral thesis. Preparing this doctoral thesis was both a challenge and a great learning experience. A challenge because Miguel Angel came from the world of cinema, and obviously he had to get to know the academic world, understand the language we were going to use, adapt his way of writing to a more academic language. But in that sense, I think it has been a very enriching process mainly during these 3 years in which we have been collaborating very frequently. With meetings, corrections, thousands of emails that we sent each other. It has been a beautiful process. Every doctoral thesis has to be evaluated, and in this sense we tried to ensure that the pre-reviewers and the examining board reflected the multidisciplinary nature of this thesis. There were researchers in audiovisual translation, people with disabilities, people representing the Spanish Centre for Subtitling and Audio Description, and also, obviously, academics from the world of audiovisual communication.
Miguel Angel's thesis caught my attention because of its high level of transfer. I will always be grateful to Irene de Higes for inviting me to be part of his examining board as president.
My name is Miguel Angel von Bisier, and I'm here to present my thesis entitled Inclusive Cinema, Context, Methodology and Praxis. You may wonder why I have not defined inclusive cinema. Inclusive cinema is born without a definition, because it is already given to us by law. Social inclusion is a principle whereby society promotes shared values aimed at the common good and social cohesion, enabling all people with disabilities to have the opportunities and resources necessary to participate fully in life, in this case educational or cultural life, and to enjoy living conditions on an equal basis with others.
The grade for the work was outstanding cum laude, but the truth is that the deliberation in the examining board was very quick. There was a debate afterwards, but it had to do with the options we wanted to present to the PhD student on how to make the most of the work and obtain the maximum level of transfer. But the deliberation was the shortest I can remember in a PhD thesis.
As well as the grade being important, which it is, the comments he received from the selection board were also very important.
He, as a professional, had seen that narratively and technically it was possible to go to maximum audio-visual accessibility. What happens? There are other barriers, which are cultural barriers and production routines, and that is very difficult to change. You can't change that in 2 months or 2 years. What he identified as a problem, the board made him see as an opportunity. That is, when you have a very long distance between where you are and where you want to go, you have 2 options. One is to complain, and the other is what Miguel Angel has done, which is to build the steps to help more people reach where he has reached. And that is why so many institutions, companies, organizations, platforms are wanting to collaborate with Miguel Angel. And in this process, he also inspires others to also want to collaborate. And we are having inclusive audiovisuals go viral, which means that we are also changing the world in our own way.
As the thesis examining board predicted, inclusive cinema began to expand in new directions.
Hello, I'm Federico Sykes, and I'm the director of the Argentinian Deaf Film Festival, FIXOR, an event where we screen films in sign language, mostly made by deaf people. I live in Buenos Aires, and I brought Miguel Angel here to do some workshops on the part of his thesis in which he explains how to work with sign language. I think that one of the objectives of the festivals is to create bridges and synergies between creators. And thanks to having Miguel Angel here, a very special opportunity arose. Nothing more and nothing less than with Disney. Look, look.
As soon as he received the call from Disney, Miguel Angel went to the company's studios in Buenos Aires.
My name is Silvina Baiardi, and I am manager of diversity, equity, and inclusivity in content at the Walt Disney Company, Latin America. I met Miguel Angel through Daniela Tabaracci, a colleague of mine who followed him on social media. And she brought him to us because she was concerned about the contribution he could make to our regional content teams. As a company, we place great importance on accessibility. From the very beginning, we believed that Miguel Angel could help our teams to get to know these new ways, to eventually be able to apply these ways of incorporating accessibility in audiovisual content. The message we wanted to give to our teams, and that we also want to give to future generations of content creators, is that inclusive filmmaking is essential so that all people who want to consume, who want to watch, who want to listen, and who want to perceive our audiovisual content are included from the very beginning of the idea of a story.
In addition to advising Disney and other public and private entities, Miguel Angel resumed his work as a filmmaker and directed several projects for associations for people with disabilities.
COSENFE Comunitat Valenciana has been working with him for several years for the audiovisual part of our inclusive tourism project. We are interested, as is logical, on the one hand in his work on accessibility and audiovisual inclusion, but we also like the way he shows the image of people with disabilities, because on many occasions this image tends to focus more on the chair or the condition than on the person with disabilities themselves. Then, in 2024, when he finished his thesis, we counted on Miguel Angel for 2 new projects for our organisation. On the one hand, we produced a guide on accessibility in communication in tourist and cultural resources, which we produced in collaboration with Turisme Comunitat Valenciana, and which was presented at the International Tourism Fair in Madrid, one of the most important in Europe. The second project is that he is our representative on the committee for the modification of UNE standards on subtitling and audio description. These changes are very important because they respond to the needs of users and also strongly support the work of both creators and distributors.
Regarding the impact of the thesis in the field of education, inclusive cinema has become part of the syllabus in subjects of different educational branches.
We are vocational training teachers at the Sound and Image branch from all over Castilla y León. And we are learning so that we can then teach the specialization course that has been introduced in the Sound and Image vocational training course on audio description and subtitling.
We came here with some preconceived ideas that Miguel Angel, a few hours later, took away in one fell swoop and showed us that this is not something that has to be done right at the end, which we can all understand, but that it is done from the beginning, which also makes the work easier later on.
He has insisted a lot on putting us in the other person's shoes, and that is what we are going to try to do with the students.
In parallel to the process of transferring inclusive filmmaking, Miguel Angel encountered more barriers when launching a new audiovisual project.
In 2023, I shot the pilot episode of a series on sport and disability. In this case, I managed to combine the audio description with the script of the episode itself. So, thinking that the distribution could be complex, it only needed to go well with the subtitling. However, when the episode was broadcast on television, the following happened.
Vale, tú eres Eros, ¿verdad? Erika, él es Eros. ¿Y qué tipo de bicicleta te gustaría que empezáramos a trabajar?
Yo quiero más pequeña y así.
Vale, tú eres Eros, ¿verdad? Erika, él es Eros. ¿Y qué tipo de bicicleta te gustaría que empezáramos a trabajar?
Yo quiero más pequeña y así.
As can be seen in the lack of synchronization between dialogue and subtitles, as well as in the many typos in the text, there is still much work to be done to ensure that the chain of audiovisual accessibility is not broken at any part of the creative and distribution process.
And yet, as we always do, we offered them our subtitles so that they could simply incorporate them during the broadcast.
On a more optimistic note, Miguel Angel considered that his inclusive method did not have to be limited to the audiovisual field. Therefore, he wrote several books containing accessible resources to prove that, if a creator acquires knowledge in inclusion, the format is irrelevant. Everything he or she makes can be enjoyed by more people. Unlike his audiovisual projects, Miguel Angel's literary publications have not had difficulties in their distribution. But it is true that cinema is a more complex industry that requires serious changes to make accessibility part of its DNA in a definitive, transversal way. Changes that, although they seemed distant, are closer than they seem. Chapter 6. A future already present. In 1948, the United Nations signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a 30-article treaty recognizing the inherent rights of all people by virtue of the fact that they were born. Over the decades, and despite growing individualism, organizations such as the Spanish Committee of Representatives of People with Disabilities have tried to reduce the injustices detected within the system.
Often, when a regulation or a law is enacted, the first document that is produced is a minimal document that does not take into account what is really important for people with disabilities, and which is then implemented thanks to the proposals that organized civil society and disability organizations promote. And a clear and concise example of this is a very important one, such as the modification of Article 49 of the Spanish Constitution.
Indeed, in 2024, the first social reform of the Spanish Constitution was approved to recognize more fully the rights of persons with disabilities. It also corrected the way in which the Constitution referred to them, describing them as diminished.
I am aware that we are late. It has been said from this gallery here. And the first thing we must do is apologize to the people to whom our Constitution referred with such an offensive term for so many years.
The reform of the Constitution was a great achievement, as was the addition of several amendments to the recently approved new cinema law. This is what Luis Cayo, president of the Spanish committee, CERMI, has to say.
Cinema, especially what is being shown in theaters, has serious accessibility deficits, and we are working to ensure that the laws protect us. We are going to have a presence in the Cinema Participation Council. The Disability Interest Group will be there, and there is already a public body, the Bisier, which can help the film industry to validate its accessibility solutions, to train and to make this basic cultural asset accessible to people with disabilities.
My name is Israel Gonzalez, director of the Spanish Center for Subtitling and Audio Description, also known as ZESIA. The panorama is changing. We have the commitment of both the streaming platforms and the entities that broadcast content through DTT to provide accessible content to users. Therefore, we are facing a much better scenario than we had before. Despite these advances, film distribution through cinemas and festivals remains a complex issue.
The opinion of XMILE and ZESIA is also shared by Carlos Reveriego, program director at the Spanish Filmoteca.
Providing cinema accessibility to people who are disabled, blind and deaf, is an issue that has not been normalized in any way at the Filmoteca or in the film field generally. I go to the Cannes Film Festival every year, I go to the San Sebastian Film Festival, I go to Seminci, to Toronto, and you feel that this doesn't exist. When you have tried to do that, when you have thought in those terms, that is when budgetary constraints have brought it down. I'm absolutely sincere about that.
When asked about the distribution of classic Spanish cinema, which is also inaccessible, his answer was equally blunt.
It's just that it's another subject that, in reality, is the same. If it's not done for contemporary cinema, it's difficult to raise it for the cinema of the past, isn't it?
When he heard these comments, Miguel Angel realized that the problems he had with Swing and his program on sport and disability were, in reality, structural barriers in the global system of creation and distribution of accessible works. This led him to undertake a trip throughout Spain to assess the state of accessibility in the two areas where it is most effectively distributed: television channels and streaming platforms. His first stop was Seville, where he met with the Media Pro Group's accessibility team to learn about its beginnings.
The accessibility area was created in 2006 with the initial purpose of originally providing service to the Media Pro Group's translations. We started with 2 people in Seville, and now we are a team of 45 or 50 people, fluctuating depending on need. Additionally, we now also have offices in Malaga and the Canary Islands, with a team working in Zaragoza. Outside Spain, we have a branch in Peru.
Before ending the interview with MediaPro and taking advantage of his knowledge of the subject, Miguel Angel asked them about the desynchronization and typos in the subtitles that Teledeport had broadcast for its program on sport and disability. After viewing them, they concluded that they had been generated live using real-time captioning.
Good afternoon, stop. I think today's going to be interesting. Stop.
With this system, widely used in television, the subtitler listens to the original audio of the program being broadcast and repeats or rephrases it out loud, dictating the content to the speech recognition software to generate the subtitles.
With the current technology, real-time captioning system inevitably has a delay of 8, 10, or 12 seconds, depending on the program type. Some tests were carried out on a channel where the broadcasting of the channel was delayed in order to overcome this problem. But currently, the option chosen is to watch the subtitles on streaming platforms. There, subtitling is more in step with the broadcast.
Once his interview with MediaPro was over, Miguel Angel returned to Valencia, and in October 2024, he contacted the management of the channel Apunt. He wanted to know how they worked on accessibility and what had happened with his film Swing, which in 2021 had been broadcast without audio description or subtitles. Alfred Costa, the channel's director at the time, replied to the first question.
This company was born in 2018 as a digital company, a world away from the analog scenarios of other public broadcasters. However, as a public authority, it is committed to the greatest implementation possible in the field of accessibility in the shortest time possible. We fulfilled this commitment in 4 years. Next year, 2025, has to be the year in which we will have 100% subtitling 365 days a year. From the point of view of audio description, we are on our way to 24 hours per week, thanks to far easier implementation than in an analog environment. Like many other regional and public broadcasters, this time we have the opportunity and therefore the goal of reaching them.
To achieve 100% subtitling, Apunt has implemented machine learning and deep learning technologies for speech recognition, according to a multimedia technician from the channel.
It helps because the subtitling technicians already have a previous transcription, which reduces the time spent on each production. The fact that technology helps these professionals also means for us that they teach and improve the processes and technologies we have. In fact, this is so much so that this year the company decided to increase the accessibility service by 2 people.
After learning about Apunt's advances in accessibility, the time had come to find out what happened with the broadcasting of Swing in 2021. A question that the channel's content management team answered.
As far as Swing is concerned, at the time it was not broadcasted with audio description and subtitling because it was at a very early stage in the channel. We were still starting up systems, testing equipment, and priority was given to the prime time slots between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. But it is already prepared with audio description and subtitles, so the next screening of the film will be accessible.
Victor pushes his wife away and pulls her closer.
who smiles and closes her eyes.
Cansada, pero bien. ¿Y tú?
With this good news, Miguel Angel finalized his research on accessibility in television. His next goal was to find out what is happening with streaming platforms. So he traveled to Barcelona to meet José Antonio de Luna, co-founder and business director of the platform Filmin.
Accessibility is an issue that concerns us and concerns all platforms. Obviously, it is something that we want to improve and ensure it improves every day so as to reach all viewers. But reality is very stubborn, and we always find ourselves faced with two factors that may limit us. One is the technological factor, the other one is the economic factor. As for the technological factor, it is as complex and as simple as that player. That player that you all see when you enter a service like Filmin, where you have the play option, it has to be adapted, to be prepared so as to be able to use these materials. And this also affects each of the devices, from a computer to a smart TV or a phone. Since 2021, our technology has enabled us to use subtitles and accessible audio, which is why, in 2020, when Swing came to us, we couldn't use all the materials that were available because we weren't ready. This is a never-ending race. In the end, technology advances, devices change, their operating systems change, and that forces us to be constantly developing, implementing improvements, as well as adapting to legal requirements. That's why we are using Swing for its inclusive concept, to be able to improve the experience in color, in the position of subtitles, or with audio description. The second part is the economic factor. In the end, in a service like Filmin, we have more or less 10,000 feature films and around 5,000 series episodes. This content is not ours. We have them for a period that normally ranges from 3 months to a year, which means that it is impossible for Filmin to financially cover the cost of all these materials. We do so when the contents are produced by us, or when the films remain on our platform for a longer period of time in order to continue increasing our catalog of accessible titles, with the dream of one day being able to reach 100% of our catalog.
Technological and economic barriers are two factors that have been repeated throughout this chapter. For this reason, given that artificial intelligence has made a strong entry into the global market, Miguel Angel traveled to Madrid to find out how this type of technology is linked to audiovisual accessibility.
We are Unware, a company dedicated to the development of technology using artificial intelligence.
We noticed that there were very few people dedicated to accessibility, with very little time to do it, and very little budget. That is why we decided to introduce artificial intelligence in this sector.
One of the great advantages of artificial intelligence is its ability to automate processes, which in our experience saves 50% of the time. This is especially useful in text transcription and subtitle synchronization.
In addition to these proposals, which can speed up the creation of accessible subtitling, artificial intelligence is also making progress in the development of audio description.
This is a tool we have for creating audio description. It's called Play Me Audio. 3 artificial intelligences work together to create the audio description. The first of these is responsible for analyzing the audio and seeing where it can be audio described.
In other words, in one click, you can detect where the audio description goes in the whole film.
Yes, and after that, it is passed on to the next artificial intelligence, which is my favorite because it describes what is being seen.
It has eyes.
It has eyes, but it doesn't just give you a description. It gives you several descriptions so that you can choose the one you like the most and the one you want to use the most. This is followed by a third artificial intelligence that narrates with synthetic voices. But these synthetic voices are very natural and are state-of-the-art. We can even use cloned voices.
Following, we see 2 scenes from Blues Time generated 100% using artificial intelligence.
In the darkness, a street lamp shines among branches with green leaves lit up. The view, initially blurred, becomes progressively clearer. Jay looks at Fatima from behind the bar and approaches her. Fatima lowers her head.
Artificial intelligence's training is slow because it needs millions and millions of quality data to train it. The good thing is that our technology is being used in Spanish television and other regional channels. However, most of the people doing this are translators. It would be useful if filmmakers could also join in to help train the AI's eyes.
Although we have only been in business for 2 years, we believe that this is only the beginning, because our technology already today allows sign language, for example, and subtitling to be broadcast in a synchronized, automated way. This gives viewers the option of customizing how they appear on screen according to their preferences.
After learning of these developments, Miguel Angel returned to Valencia and concluded his research. Then, he received a call from the General Directorate for Disability at the City Council, a delegation created in 2023 by Maria José Catalá, Valencia's mayoress.
In the last year, we have developed 20 initiatives to improve the quality of life of people with disabilities, with an investment of around €900,000. I am very pleased to be able to say that Valencia is the first Spanish city with a General Directorate for Disability, subordinate to the Mayor's office, and that has decision-making power. That is very important. It needs decision-making power.
The Directorate General for Disability supports initiatives based on the paradigm of universal design. Taking the field of architecture as an example, universal design consists of training, not only to eliminate architectural barriers, but also to develop projects from the outset, with designs for all in mind and applying accessibility measures in the development of the project itself. Such proposals are less common in the arts, although we have already endorsed some of them.
We are ACOVA, we work in mental health, and we have a pottery workshop. Therefore, we have tried to make this exhibition as inclusive as possible. And one of the things that seemed very important to us was that the QRS that we have placed on the plinth of each piece explaining it is explained by the author.
These ceramic lamps in the form of openwork trees pay homage to this magical universe.
It is not the same to be told by the same voice as to listen to that person telling you what they wanted to transmit through the piece.
Of course, these are projects that understand inclusion as an inseparable part of the experience. That is why we called Miguel Angel. His proposal has reached a sufficient degree of maturity to be disseminated at a higher level.
Thanks to the support of the Directorate General for Disability, Miguel Angel has managed to complete this documentary, which shows a before and after in the field of audiovisual accessibility. We are living in a moment of transformation. There are more resources, more tools, and more awareness. But the ultimate change requires going further. It is essential to support training in this area, so that those who bring cinema to life, creators, producers, and other professionals, understand the importance of integrating accessibility from its conception, from the script of each work. Only in this way, the future of cinema will be an open canvas, where no voice is left out and every story is truly told by all, for all. A full list of credits can be accessed at www.misinainclusivo.com.
Before finishing the film, I went back to the university where I studied audiovisual communication 20 years ago. The truth is that it has been a very important pillar along my path towards inclusive cinema. Thanks to a prize I was awarded, I was able to travel to the United States with Ienesis, my first fashion film. One of my teachers introduced me to the company that did the XMILE scent design in 2015. Besides that, it was the first university to give academic value to the project, so I see no better place than here to say goodbye with a wish. I hope that you, the creators of the future, whether you are from the world of cinema or any other discipline, will understand faster than I did that there is a large audience hungry to know your stories, stories that you have worked so hard to create. Culture is a right, not a privilege, and it is our duty to remind others of this every day.
As he wanders through the CEU's deserted corridors, Miguel Angel reaches a classroom and stops. It is dark, but he can make out an object on one of the tables. He picks it up. It is the piece of painted canvas that appeared in XMILE. Miguel Angel looks at the empty tables and chairs. He smiles and leaves the cloth on the table. He turns and leaves the classroom. For more information, you can access this QR, which contains Miguel Angel Font's doctoral thesis.